I know skinwalkers and shapeshifters are a very common theme in Navajo culture and tradition, but I've had friends in multiple tribes and have been all over the U.S., and the whole shapeshifter tale has been a common, reoccurring theme throughout many tribes, even in some parts of Canada that are more remote. Before I go on, I'm a crypto researcher, and so I've been able to make friends in many places. The stories I've gotten here have been incredible, and I really appreciate what you're doing on your channel by spreading the truth about these things being out there. Not just shapeshifters, all of them. Today, I wanted to share some shapeshifter accounts with you, since you do so many skinwalker-based stories. I'm sure you are familiar with what they are, who they are, and that they are strongly rooted in Navajo legend. While their intentions might be evil, they still have the tendency to abuse shape-shifting for the common end goal of black magic. A friend of mine who I've gotten to know over the years, who happens to be a mix of a few tribes, but is strongly Sioux. His grandfather and forefathers had tales of old men, hermits actually, that would live alone in the woods. Anytime they were ever approached by opposing tribes or people they didn't know, they would shapeshift into a deer, a bird, or even a wolf. Now, the skinwalkers in Navajo culture would primarily shapeshift into coyotes for the sake of instilling fear and harm on individuals. These shapeshifters were different. I'm not sure the type of magic they would practice, but it wasn't necessarily nefarious. These hermits wanted to be left alone and would shapeshift whatever they needed to be to avoid human contact. This is more common than you think. As this friend of mine explained to me, there were several tales from his tribe of multiple hermits and people doing this. Of course, they had their fair share of black magic practices, who also shapeshifted to instill fear and malevolent gain. I feel like that's just a part of life. Some people are good, and some people are evil. What interested me the most is that there is so much shapeshifting lore in many of these people's cultures. For the longest time, I gained friends in other tribes. I was stuck to my belief that it was just a Navajo exclusive thing. Now, I know different. Another friend of mine, who I became very close with when I was going on several different Bigfoot expeditions down in Southern California, is from a tribe down there. If you do decide to use this and record this, and he is listening, forgive me, for I forget the name of their tribe. But he told me about what he was as a very young boy, that there was a pack of ravenous wolves that came in and invaded their small village and killed several men, women, and children. This pack of ravenous wolves was actually a small band of evil shapeshifters that would shapeshift into wolves to rape, steal, and kill. It was said that this small band of shapeshifters were evil men that were cast out of other tribes and villages for the evil deeds they committed to others. So basically, a small group of bandits that were shapeshifters. They were later captured and burned alive. Their remains were scattered and dumped into the rivers from what I was told, doing a sacred ritual, a cleansing ritual. The man who told me about this is in his 70s, possibly older, but because of his culture, they are usually in very great health and of sound mind. Many of their people don't make up stories for the purpose of notoriety. They have nothing to gain out of it, no incentive to feed me made-up stories. He can remember them being burned alive as he witnessed it as just a young boy. This same man can also recall an elder when he was a boy who had left the tribe to go live in isolation. This older man also shapeshifted, but kept it a secret. He would often come and keep an eye on the village to protect it in the form of a bird. He said the bird would come, or the old man, and would watch over the children, the tribe's most vulnerable. The reason for this elder leaving the tribe to go live in isolation was that he was going to go and die by himself, but in reality, he had to hide his powers in some way. Personally, I don't know too much about that particular story because he didn't go into great detail. This is also a gentleman that I got the pleasure of sitting down with and discussing with him other findings I've received of other tribes, like Sioux and Navajo. I think the biggest thing he was surprised to hear is that there is so much magic that is practiced in other tribes and cultures. Growing up in the area, he had very little contact, if any, with any other tribes, let alone neighboring tribes. Information like this was new to him. These were not by far the craziest stories I've ever been told about shapeshifting. Years back, I was told about a few warriors from a tribe on the East Coast who would shapeshift and hunt large predators to store back plenty of food for the winter. I don't know if they would do this in secrecy or if it was common knowledge among their tribe of people. Apparently, this particular tribe went through a really bad period of famine and turned to magic to feed their people. Only the strongest and wisest warriors among the tribe were hand-selected to learn these secrets to provide food for their entire tribe. They would shapeshift into bears or wolves from what I would gather and would go hunt those same animals. They would come back with even more abundant amounts of food to feed their tribe for the entire winter. Going back to Navajo and their culture, I've gotten to listen to many accounts and witness stories of skinwalkers, some far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. I've also heard of good skinwalkers, if that even makes sense. These are skinwalkers that were, I would call, rogue walkers. They were once evil and still maintained their demonic power, but decided to place that power out on other skinwalkers. Meaning, they wouldn't prey on innocent people any longer, but instead took their revenge out on other skinwalkers who preyed upon good people. I guess even after converting to the dark, some people can have a drastic change of heart. In the land of Navajo, whom I've also acquired many friends throughout the years, have expressed their concern for the unnatural animals that they've seen out there. They believe these to also be shapeshifters, but not necessarily skinwalkers. See, skinwalkers primarily take the form of coyotes and other animals, but I do know for a fact that it's mainly coyotes and other grotesque forms. They believe there's other shapeshifters at large that aren't exactly skinwalkers. They have reported seeing very large black panther-like cats roaming around, with evil intentions, scaring and chasing those who come across them. They are demonic and to be warded away, I was told. They've also encountered pitch-black grizzly-sized bears out in the middle of the night, something I hadn't heard of until a few family members came to me with their own sightings and stories. Thinking logically, there are of course black bears in most parts of the U.S. to my knowledge, but when they go and use descriptions talking about their gargantuan size and ill intention, it really sets me in a bad place. This tells me there are far more than just skinwalkers out and about, but some who enlist the use of dark magic to aid them has many possibilities on their ability to harm individuals. The grizzly-sized bears they've been seeing also have distinct markings on them, having more humanoid features. Having either a panther or a large evil bear running after your car down the highway at night is equally terrifying, especially when they can keep up with you at 70 to 80 miles an hour. You know there is something bad at work there. An ex-reservation officer I had the pleasure of meeting spoke to me about how there was a smaller family that lived in the outskirts of the res many years ago that had been murdered apparently. Their bodies were then drug out to the middle of the desert and feasted upon. When they were found by the reservation police, there wasn't much left of them. They weren't devoured on by coyotes either, or birds. The chunks of meat taken out of them were large and still had bite marks on the intact parts of their leftover bodies. They attributed this to shapeshifters. This wasn't the only time this happened either. Throughout his time there as an officer, he had been witness to other bizarre happenings that were very similar. Driving at night, responding to a call, and seeing a grown man running on the highway next to his police vehicle doing 60 miles an hour. A grown man running on all fours and then turning into a wolf before his very eyes. This man has had to defend himself with his firearm against these things. One time in particular, he shot at this massive panther that attacked him when he was off duty. It nearly killed him just before he could fire off a few good shots at it and drove it away. This officer explained that shapeshifters have a few distinct features about them that you'll know it's them. The first being is that they have a human look to their faces, even if they have fully shifted into an animal. The second is that they will have various markings or scars along their body or face. The markings comment is probably one of the first few times I've heard that, but that's what he said from his experiences. This man has had his fair share of dancing with death from these beings alone. The worst, he said, were the bears, because of how much damage they would cause to people, structures, and carcasses. This kind of stuff happens far more often than we would all like to believe. When you're cozy in a little suburban neighborhood, at work at your bank or store, you never have to think about these things. These aren't real problems for us, but for these people, it's a life-threatening thing they have to deal with constantly and consistently. Even if these people aren't dealing with the evil persons who abuse magic to use this, shape-shifting is still very much a part of their culture and who they are as people. Some tribes it's more sacred than others. Stories and opinions will vary greatly depending on where you travel to and what tribe you speak to. I'll do what I can to gather up more stories for you and share them.